I'm Avery, 32 years old, and I work as a restaurant consultant. Built my career from the ground up. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Dinner at Voluto, the most upscale restaurant in town, for my mother-in-law Carla's anniversary. But the moment I got there, I could tell something was off. The table was packed, every seat already taken, and Carla's eyes sparkled with something that looked a lot like satisfaction. No seat for me. Oh dear, she said, her smile curling. Maybe a more budget-friendly spot suits you better. My cheeks went hot, but then I reminded myself exactly who I am, and I just laughed. What happened next became a turning point. And it changed everything. If family drama's your thing, let me know where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing tall when your family tries to bring you down. Things with Carla had been complicated ever since I met her son Lucas back in college. We were both in a business class and got paired up for a semester-long project. I was there on a partial scholarship, working 3 part-time jobs to make up the rest. Lucas, meanwhile, drove a Lexus. His parents gave him at 17 and lived in a nice off-campus apartment they paid for. But that wasn't what stood out to me. What got my attention was how kind he was, always offering to help classmates who were falling behind, volunteering at the campus food pantry, and never making me feel lesser when I had to juggle work and school. He completely shattered the image I had of a spoiled rich kid. We fell for each other slowly, over late-night study sessions and conversations about what we wanted out of life. My dream was to help struggling restaurants get back on their feet, something inspired by my time working at my aunt's diner, which eventually shut down when it couldn't compete with big chains. Lucas wanted to use his family's money and influence to do something more meaningful than just build more wealth. When he brought up the idea of meeting his parents, I was nervous, but hopeful. They're going to love you, he told me, squeezing my hand. How could they not? Carla Whitmore lived in a world of country clubs, charity events, and carefully curated social circles. Their house was massive, a colonial-style home with pristine gardens and a 3-car garage full of luxury vehicles. When Lucas introduced me, Carla gave me a smile, but it never quite reached her eyes. Avery, that's an unusual name for a girl, she said, giving me a once-over like I was under a microscope. And what does your father do? He's a mechanic, I answered proudly. Runs his own shop now, but started out as an apprentice after high school. The subtle squint in her eyes told me everything. All through dinner, she asked questions meant to highlight how different we were. Where did I vacation as a kid? Nowhere. We couldn't afford trips. What clubs was I part of? None, unless the debate team counted. Where was I planning to intern? Anywhere that would take me and work around my job schedule. Lucas didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't realize the digs were intentional. His father, Raymond, on the other hand, was kind. He asked real questions about my studies and seemed genuinely impressed by how hard I worked. But Carla had already made up her mind. I wasn't good enough for her son. As time went on and Lucas and I got closer, Carla found new ways to show how she felt. She'd leave me off the invite list, then act surprised when Lucas brought me anyway. She'd say it was so refreshing that I didn't care about appearances. Right after I dressed up for an event, she'd suggest career opportunities for Lucas that just happened to be far from where I lived. After graduation, I landed a job at a restaurant consulting firm. I started from the bottom but proved myself quickly. I had experience on both the business side and the service side, something many of my colleagues didn't. By 28, I was managing major accounts on my own, flying out to help restaurants find their unique strengths and become profitable again. Lucas and I got married at 27, despite Carla saying we were rushing things. The wedding was smaller than what she wanted for her only son, but it was perfect for us. Lucas joined his dad's investment firm, but he focused on small businesses and ethical startups. We bought a modest but beautiful home and made it clear we didn't want to rely on his family's money. Still, at every family gathering, Carla found ways to remind me of where I came from. She'd talk about her club friends, her expensive vacations, and her ties to prominent families, all while giving me looks that said, "You'll never be part of this world." Lucas sometimes noticed and tried to steer things in another direction, but most of the time he didn't catch the tone. "She's just being mom," he'd say later when I brought it up. "She doesn't mean anything by it." It was the one thing that caused real tension between us, the way he couldn't see how she treated me. A month ago, Raymond called and invited us to celebrate their anniversary at Voluto, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. With a 7-month waitlist, I had actually done some consulting for them not long before, helped fine-tune their service and update the menu, but I never mentioned that to Raymond or Carla. It wasn't a secret, it just didn't come up, and I didn't want it to sound like I was bragging. We'd love to come, I told Raymond, and I meant it. I was genuinely excited to experience the restaurant as a guest, not as a consultant. A week before the dinner, though, Lucas got a last-minute call from his biggest client. They needed him in Seattle for what looked like several days. You should still go, he said as he packed. Dad worked hard to get that reservation, and they're expecting us. Are you sure? I asked him. You know how your mom can get when you're not around to soften things. It'll be fine, he promised, giving me a quick kiss goodbye. Maybe this is a good chance for you two to connect a little. I'd spent hours getting ready for that dinner, carefully choosing a sleek black dress I'd splurged on for professional events, styling my hair into an elegant updo, and applying makeup that was polished but understated. I wanted to show Carla that I could hold my own in her world, that I belonged. As I pulled up outside the restaurant, I took a deep breath. Just one evening, I told myself. You can handle Carla for one night. If only I'd known what was really waiting for me. Voluto sat on the top floor of one of the city's most iconic historic buildings, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. The elevator doors opened right into the dining room, where a host in a tuxedo stood behind a podium made from a single piece of walnut. Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation? He asked, all professionalism. I'm with the Whitmore party, I replied. For Raymond and Carla's anniversary. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Ah, yes, of course. Right this way. As I followed him through the softly lit dining room, I took in the quiet elegance, hand-blown glass lighting, original art on the walls, and table settings that looked straight out of a magazine. Each table felt private, carefully spaced, and positioned to showcase the stunning views. The gentle hum of conversation and the occasional clink of glass created a refined atmosphere. I spotted their table before we even got there. Raymond and Carla were already seated, along with Lucas's sister Jenna and her husband Blake, Raymond's brother Gregory and his wife Lillian, and two couples I recognized as longtime family friends. They were seated near the windows, one of the best tables in the entire restaurant, with a perfect view of the city lights. Raymond saw me first and stood with a warm smile. Avery, glad you could make it. Everyone turned to look at me, and right away, I noticed something wasn't right. The table was set for 10 people, and every single seat was already taken. Avery, Carla said, her voice thick with feigned concern. I wasn't expecting you. I looked around, confused. Raymond invited us weeks ago. Lucas had to fly to Seattle for work, but he told me to come. Oh dear, Carla replied, casually touching her pearl necklace. When Lucas called to say he couldn't make it, I just assumed you wouldn't be coming either. I mean, it is a family celebration. She added a slight emphasis on the word family. I gave your seat to the Hamiltons, she continued, gesturing toward a couple I didn't know. They just got back from Europe and we had so much to catch up on. I didn't think you'd mind, especially with Lucas not here. The table had fallen into an awkward silence. Jenna looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable. Raymond's brow furrowed. I'm sure we can fit another chair, he offered, starting to glance around for someone to help. Oh, I don't think that'll work, Carla said smoothly. We're already at capacity. And you know how strict Voluto is about their seating, fire code regulations and all. She gave me a tight smile. Maybe another time, dear. I felt the flush of embarrassment rising up my neck. All eyes were on me now, silently watching for my response. I noticed Blake, Jenna's husband, hiding a smile behind his wine glass. Perhaps a more affordable spot would be a better fit for tonight, Carla added sweetly, though her eyes were anything but warm. There's a charming little bistro just down the street. Very accessible. The message couldn't have been clearer. Voluto was for people like them. Not for people like me. In that moment, I felt like the scholarship student all over again. The daughter of a mechanic standing in a space I was never meant to feel comfortable in. I thought about every moment Carla had quietly pushed me aside, every subtle comment, every time she'd conveniently left me out. But this was something else entirely. This was blatant. I see, I said quietly, working hard to keep my voice from shaking. At least Raymond had the grace to look genuinely uncomfortable. Carla, surely we can. It's really fine, she cut in smoothly. Avery understands. These things happen. I stood there, feeling every second drag out as I tried to decide what to do. Some people looked at me with sympathy. Others with something closer to amusement. For a moment, I thought about quietly leaving and calling Lucas. I even considered never putting myself in this position again. A memory floated back, Christmas, 3 years ago, when Carla forgot to include me in the family photo. and Jenna's baby shower when my invitation was somehow lost in the mail until Lucas directly asked why I hadn't responded. But this was different. This felt planned and very visible. This was Carla making it perfectly clear I didn't belong at her table. In any sense of the word. I could feel tears threatening my throat tight as I fought to keep them in. I refused to let her see me cry. I wouldn't give her that. And then something shifted. A memory came to mind, one that changed how I saw everything happening in that moment. As I stood there, caught in my mother-in-law's carefully planned exclusion, a memory came rushing back from 7 months earlier. I'd been brought in to consult with a high-end restaurant that was struggling after a recent change in ownership. Reservations had dropped by nearly 25%, and the reviews were starting to turn sour. That restaurant? It was Voluto. Julian Cross, the new owner and executive chef, was in a tough spot when we were first connected. He had poured his life savings into purchasing what had once been the city's most prestigious dining spot and taken on a serious amount of debt, only to watch it slip through his fingers. I don't get it, he told me during our first meeting, sitting right here in this very dining room. I trained in Paris. My technique is solid. Why aren't people coming? I spent 3 weeks working closely with Voluto, shadowing operations, talking with staff, reviewing financials, and digging through customer feedback. The problems weren't obvious, but they were meaningful. The menu had grown stale. The service felt stiff and overly formal. Even the wine list came off as overpriced and uninspired. Most importantly, Julian was still trying to copy the previous owner's vision instead of bringing his own to the table. You're not really connecting with your guests, I'd said during our final presentation. They're not getting your passion or your perspective. Everything's technically impressive, but they don't feel you in it. Together, we made sweeping changes. We reworked the menu descriptions, retrained the servers, softened the lighting, updated the music, and developed signature dishes that told Julian's personal story. I even helped him form partnerships with local farmers and artisans, adding a fresh narrative to the ingredients themselves. Within 2 months, reservations were up by 45%. By month 4, the place was fully booked with a 7-month waitlist. One of Julian's seafood dishes was even featured in a national culinary magazine. During that process, we built a genuine friendship. Julian had invited me back several times to try new items and offer feedback. The last time I visited, just 3 weeks ago, he insisted on naming a new cocktail in my honor, the Avery. A perfectly balanced drink with bourbon, house-made cherry syrup, and a touch of bitters, a mix of strength and warmth. And now here I was being told I didn't belong. In the very restaurant I'd helped bring back to life. A slow smile crept across my face as the absurdity of it all settled in. Carla had no idea. She'd chosen Voluto as the setting for this dinner specifically to highlight the difference between her world and mine, never suspecting that I played a key role in transforming the very space. I could have walked out quietly like she expected. I could have called Lucas and stirred up a whole family issue. But instead, I decided to do something else. "Excuse me for just a moment," I said calmly, stepping away from the table before anyone could stop me. I walked directly over to the host stand where the maitre d' André was reviewing the evening's reservations. As soon as he looked up, recognition lit up his face. "Ms. Wells, what a pleasure. Are you here to see Chef Julian?" "Actually, André," I said with a polite smile, "I'm here for the Whitmore anniversary dinner, but it seems there was a bit of a mix-up with the seating. Would Julian happen to be available?" "Absolutely, he's in the kitchen. I'll get him right away." André slipped through the swinging doors and I took a moment to glance back at the Whitmore table. Carla was watching me closely now, her expression sharp. The rest of the group had mostly returned to their conversations, probably thinking I was calling a ride or finding a quieter spot to dine alone. But less than a minute later, the kitchen doors opened wide and Julian stepped out. Despite the busy dinner service, his chef's coat was spotless, his posture relaxed but confident. At 45, with salt and pepper hair and easy laugh lines, he carried the presence of someone completely at home in his work. "Avery," he called out, loud enough that a few nearby tables turned. He walked up and hugged me without hesitation. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming tonight?" he asked warmly. I would have had something special prepared. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Carla's expression freeze. Raymond looked puzzled. The whole table had gone quiet again, all eyes fixed on me and the chef of the most exclusive restaurant in the city. "It was meant to be a surprise," I said lightly with a small nod toward the Whitmore table. "I'm actually here for my in-laws' anniversary dinner, but it looks like there's been a seating issue." Julian followed my gaze, quickly assessing the situation. I didn't need to say much more, something in my face must have said the rest. Understanding clicked in his expression. A mix-up at my restaurant, he said firmly. That's not acceptable. Then he turned to Andre. Please prepare table 12 for Ms. Wells. Table 12, the chef's table. The best seat in the entire house. It overlooked both the open kitchen and the skyline, usually reserved months ahead for visiting celebrities or top critics. Julian, that's really not necessary, I began. I really don't want to make a scene, I started. I insist, Julian replied, his voice clear and firm, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Only the best for the woman who saved Voluto. As he guided me through the dining room, I could feel eyes following us, especially from the Whitmore table. Carla's carefully crafted plan was unraveling in real time, and I couldn't help the quiet satisfaction rising in my chest. Sometimes life has a way of delivering poetic justice. Saved Voluto? Isn't that a bit much? I murmured as he walked beside me, his hand gently resting at my elbow. Not even slightly, he replied, pulling out a chair for me at table 12. If it weren't for you, I'd probably be back working as a sous chef somewhere, trying to recover from a failed investment. You brought this place back to life, Avery. 2 servers had already appeared and were setting the table in record time. Crisp white linen, polished silver, a vase of fresh flowers placed perfectly at the center. You're our honored guest tonight, Julian said. The kitchen will be preparing a special tasting menu for you, compliments of the house. Julian, really? I began. Nope, he said with a wink. I'm not taking no for an answer. Andre will take great care of you. I need to head back, but I'll check in later. As he turned and walked back toward the kitchen, I glanced over at the Whitmore table. All conversation had stopped. Most looked puzzled. A few surprised. And Carla, she looked absolutely stunned. Her carefully made plan had just been quietly undone by the daughter-in-law she tried to exclude, now being treated like a VIP. Andre stepped up beside me. Chef asked me to offer anything from our wine collection, he said. Perhaps the Bellrive 2015? I believe you were the one who recommended it for our list. That would be lovely, thank you, Andre. As I settled into my seat, I noticed Raymond rising and making his way toward my table. His expression held both curiosity and confusion. Avery, he said, taking in the view and my newly set table, what's going on? How do you know the owner? I smiled. I consulted for Voluto about 7 months ago. When Julian took over, the place was struggling. I helped him turn things around. His eyebrows lifted. You did? I had no idea, he added, shaking his head slightly. Carla's been telling everyone how hard it was to get a reservation here, that she had to call in favors from the Whites. Is everything all right, Mr. Whitmore? Andre had returned with the wine, expertly decanting it. Yes, I was just speaking with my daughter-in-law, Raymond replied, still looking a little surprised. Ms. Wells is held in very high regard here, Andre said as he poured the wine with practiced precision. Chef Julian credits her with Voluto's success. Raymond looked at me with something new in his eyes, maybe respect, maybe realization. I see, he said, pausing for a moment. Well, would you like to rejoin us at our table? I'm sure we could find space. That's kind of you, Raymond, but Chef has prepared a special menu for me here. Please go enjoy your anniversary. We can catch up later. After he returned to the table, I saw him lean in to speak with Carla, who now looked visibly flustered. Guests at their table were beginning to exchange glances and whispered comments in my direction. Soon, my first course arrived, a delicate amuse-bouche not listed on the regular menu. Beside it was a small card, handwritten by Julian himself. For the woman who taught me how to tell my story through food. As I savored the complex flavors, Jenna approached, looking awkward. Mom told everyone you weren't coming, she said, skipping any kind of greeting. If I'd known she was pulling one of her stunts. It's okay, Jenna, I replied gently, though we both knew it wasn't. No, it's not, she said quietly. She's been doing this to you for years, and none of us have really said anything. Blake thought it was amusing at first, but even he's uncomfortable now. Mom may have gone too far this time. Would you like to join me? I offered, the words surprising even me. Jenna and I had never been close, mostly because of her loyalty to Carla. She looked tempted for a second, then shook her head. Better not. But maybe we could do lunch sometime? Just us. I'd like that, I said, smiling. Throughout the rest of the meal, I kept noticing the shift in energy at the Whitmore table. Raymond was unusually quiet. The Hamiltons, the couple who'd been given my seat, looked increasingly uncomfortable. Gregory and Lillian appeared to be speaking to Carla in low but serious tones. By the time the main course arrived, Julian returned to check on me. Everything to your liking, he asked, though we both knew it was flawless. It's incredible, Julian. Thank you, really. The pleasure's mine, he said. I'm experimenting with a few new dishes for spring. I'd love your feedback sometime. I'd be happy to help. I was fully aware of Carla watching this exchange, her lips pressed into a tight line. The entire dynamic had shifted. In Carla's world, polished, elite, and exclusive, I was always the outsider. The girl who didn't grow up with privilege. The one she thought had lucked into marrying her son. But here in the very restaurant she chose to showcase her status while sidelining me. I was respected. I was appreciated. And for once I was fully seen. As the evening continued, I could see Carla growing more and more unsettled. This dinner had been her moment to shine, to cement her role as the elegant hostess and quietly remind me of where I stood. But instead, everything had flipped. She was just another customer, while I was getting personal attention from the owner himself. Everything reached a boiling point when dessert was served at both tables. Mine was an intricate creation that wasn't on the regular menu. A delicate chocolate sculpture topped with gold leaf and paired with homemade ice cream. The Whitmore table received the standard dessert. Elegant, sure, but clearly not tailored. That's when Carla snapped. This doesn't make any sense. Her voice cut through the refined atmosphere of Voluto like a sour note in a symphony. She stood up and began storming toward my table, leaving her anniversary dinner behind. Heads turned throughout the restaurant. And the quiet hum of conversation faded as people watched it unfold. Carla, Raymond called after her, his tone sharp, but she didn't stop. She stopped at my table, her manicured hands gripping the back of the empty chair across from me. What did you do? Pull strings? Use Lucas's name to get special treatment. I calmly set down my dessert fork. Good evening, Carla. Would you like to join me? Let's not pretend this was a coincidence, she said quietly, lowering her voice but not her frustration. You had this in mind all along, didn't you? You knew I didn't include you in the reservation and you came anyway, set this all up to make a scene. I took a slow sip of water, giving myself a second to stay composed. Actually, Raymond invited us weeks ago. And even after Lucas had to cancel, he encouraged me to come. I had no idea you'd taken me off the reservation. Then explain all of this, she said, waving toward the table, the custom dishes, the wine, the way the owner had treated me like a VIP. I believe I can answer that, came Julian's voice as he approached. He'd clearly noticed the tension and stepped in, extending a hand toward her. Julian Cross. I'm the owner and executive chef here at Voluto. You must be Avery's mother-in-law, she's mentioned you. Carla shook his hand, clearly caught off guard by the interruption. Yes, I'm Carla Whitmore. We're celebrating our anniversary tonight. She quickly shifted back into her polished social mode, the one she used around people who mattered to her. Your restaurant is lovely. Thank you, Julian replied with professional warmth. And thank you for being part of Avery's family. She's truly remarkable. Voluto wouldn't be what it is without her. Carla's smile faltered. Her expertise? When I bought this place last year, it was struggling financially and reputationally. Avery transformed it. Everything from the menu to our service model. She refined all of it. The cocktail you're enjoying? She helped develop that. The seasonal tasting menu? That was her vision. She even brought in the local farm network we now depend on. With every word from Julian, Carla's version of the story started to crumble. Other Whitmore relatives had gathered nearby, drawn by the commotion but now staying to hear what was being said. I had no idea, Raymond said, turning to me with a look I'd never seen before. Respect. Avery, why didn't you ever tell us you were involved with Voluto? I shrugged lightly. It was just another client. I didn't want to seem like I was showing off. Just another client? Julian repeated with surprise. Avery, you turned this place around. Since implementing your work, we've been featured in every major food magazine in the country. A wave of quiet murmurs passed through the group. It was almost comical. Jenna was staring at me like I was someone new. Gregory and Lillian exchanged wide-eyed glances. The Hamiltons looked like they wanted to disappear. Carla stood frozen. She hesitated for a moment. Her usual calm seemed to waver. I could almost see her recalibrating everything she thought she knew about me. Well, she finally said, forcing a tight smile. How interesting. I suppose your food service background paid off after all. It was a last attempt to spin my success into something small. But something inside me shifted. Years of side comments being left out, brushed off. They all snapped into focus in that moment. I stood up slowly, making sure we were eye to eye. My background, I said softly but clearly, is in business strategy, market analytics, and operational systems. I have a master's in hospitality management from Stanton University. I've helped dozens of restaurants across the country recover and grow. I've been featured in Modern Enterprise and named one of the top consultants in the field. I stepped a little closer. But you never once asked about my work, did you, Carla? You decided who I was the moment you learned my father was a mechanic. You never gave me a chance to show you who I am. For Lucas, for your family, for any of this. The restaurant was silent. Even the kitchen had paused. That's not true, Carla said weakly. I've always tried to make her feel welcome. Your actions haven't exactly made that easy, Raymond said suddenly, surprising all of us. Avery's right. You've treated her unfairly from the beginning. I saw it, but I didn't speak up. That was wrong. Carla turned toward her husband, stunned. Raymond, it's time to be honest, he said gently. Tonight was meant to celebrate our 25th anniversary. But instead, you missed an opportunity to include Avery meaningfully. That's not the kind of people we are. That's not the woman I married. She looked visibly uncomfortable. She glanced around at the circle of relatives, clearly searching for support, but no one stepped in. Even her daughter Jenna, always loyal, was staring back at her with disappointment. I think, Gregory finally said into the heavy silence, that an apology might be appropriate. Every eye turned to Carla. The anniversary dinner she had so carefully planned was now completely off the rails. Her reputation at this exclusive venue had taken a hit, and her own family was now unified against her actions. I may have acted too quickly, she said, each word seeming to take effort. If I made you feel unwelcome, Avery, that wasn't my intention. It wasn't a full apology, we all knew that. But it was the closest Carla Whitmore had ever come to admitting she was wrong. Thank you, Carla, I replied, doing my best to sound gracious. I appreciate that. An awkward silence settled over the group. Julian, sensing the discomfort, stepped in with practiced ease. Mrs. Whitmore, while we get your table reset, perhaps you and your guests would enjoy some coffee and digestives in our private lounge. On the house, of course, for your anniversary. Carla jumped at the offer, eager for a graceful exit. That would be lovely, thank you. As the group began to move toward the lounge, Raymond lingered for a moment. Avery, would you care to join us? He asked. I shook my head gently. I think I'll finish my dessert and head home. It's been quite the evening. Raymond gave a quiet nod. I owe you an apology too, he said. I've been aware of how Carla treats you, and I've let it go on far too long. That changes starting tonight. After they left for the lounge, Julian returned to my table. Well, that was something, he said, taking the seat across from me. How are you holding up? Surprisingly well, I replied, and to my own surprise I meant it. This has been building for a while, honestly. Family dynamics are never easy, he said knowingly. My mother-in-law didn't like me at first either. Thought I wasn't steady enough to marry her daughter, being a chef and all. What changed her mind? I asked. He grinned. Got a Michelin star. Suddenly I was worthy. I laughed. So all I needed was a full restaurant overhaul to get some respect? Sometimes people only value success when it looks the way they expect it to, he said with a shrug. By the way, that offer to consult on our spring menu still stands whenever you have the time. As I finished the last bite of dessert, I realized something had quietly shifted. The careful hierarchy Carla had maintained for years had been undone. And it wasn't just her learning about my work, it was the rest of the family finally recognizing how she treated me. When I walked out of Voluto that night, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. Sometimes truth, even when it comes through tension, can clear the air. The next morning, before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, my phone was buzzing nonstop. The first message was from Jenna. That was wild. Mom's still speechless. Lunch next week? My treat. Then came a formal email from Raymond. Avery, I want to restate my apology for what happened last night. Carla and I would appreciate the chance to speak with you and Lucas once he's back. Let us know when would be convenient. Lillian, Gregory's wife, who had always kept her distance, sent me a friend request on social media. The Hamiltons, who had unknowingly taken the seat meant for me, sent a giant bouquet of flowers with a card apologizing for their unintentional involvement. By midday, I had heard from every single person who was at that dinner. Everyone, that is, except Carla. Lucas called during his lunch break and I could hear the concern in his voice right away. Dad called me this morning. What on earth happened last night? Are you okay? I gave him a straightforward rundown, sticking to the facts more than the feelings. As I talked, I could hear his breathing change, slower, heavier. I can't believe she actually did that, he said once I finished. Actually, no, I can believe it. I just can't believe I let it slide for this long. I'm sorry, Avery. You didn't know she'd do something like this, I said gently. But I knew how she acted toward you, he replied. I've known for years. I've made excuses because it felt easier than addressing it. His voice caught slightly. That ends now. I'm coming home early. My flight lands tonight. When Lucas arrived, tired from scrambling to reschedule everything, he hugged me tighter than usual. No more, he whispered into my hair. No more letting her treat you that way. The following day, Raymond called again. Carla would like to speak with you, he said. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Raymond, I'm not sure I'm ready for another performance, I admitted. I understand, he said quietly. But I really think this matters for all of us. Lucas and I drove to the Whitmore estate in silence, both of us mentally preparing for whatever was waiting. The grand colonial home looked just as pristine as always, but something about the energy felt different. When we reached the door, Raymond opened it himself, a small but surprising change considering they usually had staff handle that. Thanks for coming, he said, leading us into the formal living room. Carla was already there, sitting on the edge of an antique settee. She looked smaller somehow. Still sitting upright, still composed, but there was a tiredness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Lucas. Avery, she said as we took our seats across from her. Thank you for coming. A heavy silence followed. Raymond cleared his throat with intention. I want to apologize, Carla finally said, the words sounding practiced. My behavior at the restaurant was inappropriate. I shouldn't have excluded you from the dinner, Avery. Lucas shifted beside me, tension radiating from him. That's it? After years of making Avery feel unwelcome after what happened in public, all you have to say is it was inappropriate. Lucas, Raymond began, but Carla raised a hand to stop him. Your father and I talked at length last night, she said, her eyes on Lucas. He helped me see that my behavior hasn't been fair. Problematic, Lucas repeated, his voice tight. Mom, you haven't treated Avery with the warmth she deserved. Why? Because her family doesn't belong to the right social circles? Because she worked through college instead of having everything handed to her. Carla winced at his words. It wasn't that simple. Then explain it, Lucas challenged. Help me understand why you've spent 6 years making my wife feel like she doesn't belong here. For a moment, I thought Carla might retreat behind her usual polished exterior. But then something unexpected happened. The mask she always wore cracked just slightly. Because she didn't need us, she said softly. You didn't need us anymore. Lucas and I exchanged confused glances. What do you mean? He asked. Carla smoothed a non-existent wrinkle on her skirt. From the moment you were born, everything was planned. Top schools, the right connections, joining your father's firm. We set everything in motion. Her voice trembled just a little. Then you met Avery and suddenly those plans our world weren't enough anymore. You started talking about carving your own path. About finding meaning beyond wealth. She turned to me then, really looked at me, maybe for the first time. You were confident. Independent. You didn't need our name, our resources, or our influence. And worst of all, you helped Lucas see things differently. The truth sat heavily in the room. For years I believed Carla didn't think I was good enough for their world. But this was different. She was afraid I had led Lucas away from the life she had so carefully laid out for him. Mom, Lucas said gently, I started questioning all that long before I met Avery. She didn't pull me away. She gave me the strength to choose something different. I never wanted to distance Lucas from his family, I added. I just wanted him to feel fulfilled. To make choices that were truly his. Raymond moved closer and took Carla's hand. I've been telling her for years, success doesn't always look like it used to. Your generation sees value in independence and building something personal. I'm trying to understand that, Carla admitted. It's hard to let go of the expectations I've held for so long. It wasn't a complete change, not yet. Decades of deeply rooted beliefs don't vanish in a single conversation. But it was something. A shift. I don't expect us to be best friends overnight, I said carefully. But I'd like for us to move forward with mutual respect. Carla nodded. I think I can do that. As we left the Whitmore estate that afternoon, Lucas squeezed my hand. Well, that was unexpected. Your mom apologizing? I asked. He shook his head thoughtfully. No. Her being honest. I don't remember the last time she dropped the perfect act. In the weeks that followed, I started noticing small changes. Carla would call occasionally, asking for my opinion on restaurants she was considering for lunches. Once she even forwarded an article about a restaurant turnaround and said it reminded her of my work. They weren't grand gestures, but they were real. Jenna and I finally met for the lunch she promised. Over iced tea and salads, she opened up about growing up under Carla's expectations. It was a lot, she admitted. Everything had to be just right, to match this image she always wanted to project. That sounds exhausting, I said. It was, she nodded. Sometimes it still is. She stirred her drink, pausing before adding, you know what's wild? Mom didn't come from all this. I looked up. What do you mean? Her dad was a janitor. She waitressed her way through community college. Met Dad while serving at a diner near his law school. I nearly choked on my water. Carla was a waitress? Jenna nodded again. She completely reinvented herself after marrying Dad. Changed how she spoke, studied etiquette books, cut ties with her old life. She spent 45 years making sure no one knew where she came from. Suddenly, everything clicked. Her obsession with appearances. Her discomfort with my background. It wasn't that she thought I wasn't good enough. It was that I reminded her of who she used to be and who she'd worked so hard to leave behind. 7 months after that infamous dinner, Lucas and I hosted a small gathering at our place. It was part housewarming, part celebration. We'd finally finished renovating our kitchen. The space was now perfect for testing new recipes and hosting casual cooking classes with friends. This is beautiful, Raymond said as I handed him a glass of wine. You've really done something special here. Our home was modest by Whitmore standards, a restored craftsman with charm, not grandeur. But it reflected us. Lucas's eye for quality and my love for practicality and perfect balance. I watched as our guests chatted in the backyard garden. Julian had come with his wife Maya, bringing a bottle of wine from a small vineyard. He'd recently learned that Jenna and Blake's 3-year-old daughter liked to play on a blanket in the shade with the neighbor's little one. My parents were nearby, chatting easily with Raymond by the grill. My dad offering tips on how to maintain the vintage motorcycle Raymond had picked up as a retirement project. And then there was Carla. She sat a bit stiffly on a garden chair, not quite relaxed, but present. She was engaged in conversation with my Aunt Nora, who had taken over my late aunt's old diner and transformed it into a thriving farm-to-table breakfast spot, with a little help from me behind the scenes, Avery. I turned at the sound of my name. It was Carla's niece, Tessa, a college sophomore studying hospitality management. Could I ask you something about my internship applications? Of course, I said, motioning for her to follow me into the quieter kitchen. Since that night at Voluto, Tessa had come to me for advice more than once. She was curious about my career in a way that had surprised both of us. I have interviews with 3 hotel groups, she explained, scrolling through notes on her phone. But I'm not sure which would give me the best experience for restaurant development. As we walked through the pros and cons of each option, I noticed Carla watching us from the window. Our eyes met, and for a brief moment, she gave me a small nod. A quiet signal of acknowledgement, maybe even approval. The dynamic between Carla and me was still complicated. There were occasional slips, moments when her old views resurfaced. But something had shifted. She'd never spoken aloud about her own background, the story Jenna had shared with me in confidence. But knowing it had helped me see her differently. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began saying their goodbyes, Carla approached me in a quiet moment. That marinade you used for the chicken, it was wonderful, she said. Would you be willing to share the recipe? Of course, I replied, caught a bit off guard. It's my grandmother's, very simple ingredients, but the technique is key. She hesitated for a beat, then added, maybe you could show me sometime. I used to enjoy cooking years ago. The idea that Carla had once been at home in a kitchen, not just directing staff but cooking herself, felt surprisingly intimate. I'd love that, I said, sincerely, after everyone had left and Lucas and I were finishing the dishes. He wrapped his arms around me from behind. I think that went well, he said softly, his cheek against my hair. Better than I expected, I agreed, leaning back into him. Your mom actually ate my food without searching for imaginary flaws. He laughed. That's progress. We worked in peaceful silence for a bit before he spoke again. I've been thinking about something. I turned toward him. What's on your mind? What would you think about starting a family soon? I studied his face. Are you sure you're ready? He nodded. I think so. Watching you with Jenna's little girl today, I could really picture it. You'd be an amazing mom. I smiled. And what kind of in-laws do you think we'll be? I asked, half joking. The kind that respect boundaries, he said without hesitation. The kind that offer support, not control. The kind that let our kids make their own choices even if they're not the ones we imagined. I thought about everything we'd been through with Carla, from rejection to resistance to a fragile sort of mutual understanding. I thought about the time we lost to assumptions and fear, and I thought about how healing had finally begun, even if imperfectly. I'd like that, I said, resting my head against his chest, to break the cycle. When I look back on that night at Voluto now, I realize it really was a turning point. Not because I won, or because Carla lost, but because the truth finally broke through the carefully constructed appearances we'd all been maintaining. Her beliefs about who I was, and maybe even who she was, couldn't survive in the light of reality. The lesson wasn't just that success earns respect, though in some cases that's true. The deeper truth was this: being fully yourself, without shrinking or apologizing, is where real freedom comes from. Carla had spent decades hiding her past, creating a polished image, sometimes at the expense of honest relationships, and I had nearly fallen into the trap of chasing her approval, of trying to mold myself into something I wasn't. But in standing my ground that night, and choosing not to shrink, I found something far more important than Carla's acceptance. I found confidence in who I was, independent of anyone else's validation. Family dynamics are intricate, woven from love, expectations, old stories, and hope. Sometimes the connections get tangled, forming patterns we didn't intend. But with patience and intention, even the most complicated knots can be reshaped into something new, not perfect, maybe, but honest and stronger. For it.as Lucas and I talk about starting our own family, I think about the legacy we want to create. Point 1: built on acceptance instead of expectation. Support instead of pressure. I think about the kind of mother-in-law I might become someday, and I quietly promise myself, I'll remember what it felt like to stand on the outside, hoping to be let in. Have you ever stood your ground when someone tried to make you feel small? Did it change your relationship in a way you didn't expect? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear how you navigated those moments. And if this story spoke to you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and honoring your truth. Thanks for being here. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to shrink to make others more comfortable.